So, lads, I really don't like talking about this stuff, and like, regardless of what you see in the channel, like, I don't, regardless of what you guys think, and it's something that needs to be said, and I do feel like, I don't know, at least when it comes to these arguments, that I can at least talk about them in good faith, because I do think there are a lot of places on here, on Twitter, and everything, where it's not good faith people talking about it. And obviously, I don't feel like I'm the only person who can do that, but I do think that it is important to discuss this, because this is completely unacceptable. It is absolutely, completely unacceptable. And what we've seen from, we've seen some posts, and it's a WNBA rotten to the core epidemic amongst people that are involved in this league. And by the way, this is not something that I'm saying is like that these are awful people. It is just being a toxic narrative that people have bought into, and it is absolutely horrible. So we're going to start off talking about this from Jemele Hill. And by the way, look, we all know who Jemele Hill is. We all know some of the stuff she said, but you would think no matter what, even just as a decent person, like we are allowed as humans get things wrong. We're allowed, like, we can make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all absolutely going to make mistakes when it comes to what we say. But the reality is that I think that it's better to own mistakes than it is to ignore them and continue to go with the bad mistakes. Like, again, I will say this right now. My most viewed video is talking about Erica Wheeler, who, while yes, on the court, I did think she was a problem for the Indiana Fever. Off the court, she's one of the most important players for Caitlyn Clark's rookie year, and she was exceptional. She was such an important player for the Fever. My most viewed video was originally called "The Indiana Fever's Worst Players Were in the Fever," and I was like, or the Fever's worst players were in their team, and I'm like, I'm not going to ignore what I said. I apologize. I was wrong. I was wrong with this video. I think in my analysis of the actual sport of basketball, the game, was correct, but I do think the narrative went too far. And I can admit that I'm wrong. I've said it plenty of times. I've tweeted it. There are a bunch of times where I'm like, I don't think Caitlyn Clark and Leah Boston can play together. That's a basketball take, but I'll admit when I'm wrong. You can admit when you're wrong. And there are definitely some takes that I've made that I just don't know off the top of my head, that if I'll get called out on them, rather than just deleting a video, it's fine to just admit you're wrong sometimes. So this happened with Jemele Hill. Somebody said, the people who would weaponize her for racist attacks and villainize her for the actions of others are two sides of the same coin here. And I stand by this. Like, both the Caitlyn Clark haters and the crazy people on both sides are two sides of the same coin. She gets as much or more hate as any player, yet she's the one asked to address and to fix it. And then Jemele Hill says, I don't like to play at Professional Olympics, but as CC had to delete her social media accounts. And I remember calling it out at the time. And I'm like, the reason why Caitlyn Clark doesn't have to delete her social media accounts is Caitlyn Clark doesn't run her social media accounts. She doesn't run Twitter. Anything with these algorithms, she does not run them. She's got people running them, just like a lot of NBA players, just like a lot of most professional soccer players, people run their accounts. As Aaliyah Boston did. CC has given it a few hard shots herself, talk trash, jawed with refs, but anytime she's subjected to a physical foul, hard foul, trash talk, opposing players are absolutely villainized. She's not constantly subjected to racial slurs. Yes, she has been. And whatever hate she does experience, she's not told to toughen up or that her feelings don't matter. She is not subjected to both sidesism, nor are people trying to justify the hatred against her. That's a difference. Yeah, the reality is that this is a horrible tweet. This is an awful, awful tweet. So Jemele Hill, after being called out for that tweet today, what does she do? Does she, post posts being like, even something like protect women in sports, and take down the tweet? Does she keep the tweet up, quote tweet it, and be like, I apologize for this, I was evidently wrong, I hope Caitlyn Clark's okay, and I apologize for not, I don't know, something along those lines? Or does she take down the tweet, mention nothing, and pretend like it didn't happen? Of course she did the latter. Of course she did the latter. And then this is one thing that I find horrible. And by the way, this is Dawn Staley's one of the best coaches in women's basketball. We've seen it with what South Carolina are doing this year, even without Ashton Walker. She's an incredible coach. She's one of the better WNBA players ever. She was a really, really good WNBA player. And look, Dawn Staley, in a lot of situations, I don't have an issue with Dawn Staley, but this is awful. So basically, someone tweeted out, ever since I saw Dawn Staley follows Antonio Brown, I'm a South Carolina op. And by the way, like, look, I don't think that is the issue, is her following Antonio Brown initially. Like, I follow 325 people on Twitter. I used to be really, really specific with who I follow. I used to vet who I follow. And anyone who used to know me from 2K would know that, like, the reason why I was so specific on who I followed is because I think that if somebody that you are following ends up doing something egregious, it can look bad on you. And especially if you know that and continue following him, that's where the problem is. So the reality of the situation is that if you look at my 300 people, I can guarantee you I follow at least one or two guys that have said awful stuff. But again, I don't know it off the top of my head. But if there are people coming to me saying, like, this is what X, Y, and Z person posted, this is what, showing me a tweet from someone that is as out of line as what Antonio Brown said about Caitlyn Clark, I would just go, okay, thank you for letting me know, and click the unfollow button. Like, this is not a big apology thing. This first tweet is not even a big deal. She then responds with, if I keep up with who I follow and don't as much as y'all keep up with who I follow, I wouldn't have a life. Bully someone else who actually gives who wants to follow you with their comments read above. Like, and all the quote tweets are, yeah, you can never make me hate Dawn Staley. It's like, Dawn Staley refused to unfollow Antonio Brown. She still, I'm not sure to this day if she still does, but at the time she refused to. And that's where the thing is. When you're being called out, and look, this is the most minor thing in the world, by the way. This is the most minor thing in the world. But what Antonio Brown said about Caitlyn Clark, honestly, like, could have got him, like, wasn't that far off getting him arrested. It was that bad. Like, it was the most disgusting and vile stuff. I'm not even going to repeat it. But the reality is that a lot of people follow Antonio Brown. A lot of people don't notice because of the For You, who they're following, and maybe don't say they didn't even see the stuff. And that's fine. But if you're called out about that, and instead of just clicking the unfollow button, Dawn Staley did not have to respond to this. And that's the whole thing when it comes to the Caitlyn Clark issue, is that bullying is okay if it's against Caitlyn Clark. And that is something that the WNBA needs to prove otherwise. They need to prove otherwise. Mental health matters unless it's Caitlyn Clark. Bullying is okay unless it's Caitlyn Clark. If you say anything negative about any other player, the WNBPA will go for your media credentials. If Jemele Hill writes an essay basically saying, you know, Caitlyn Clark doesn't actually receive any hate, instead of even backtracking, apologizing, or anything, like she didn't even have, like, she could have apologized. Like, I would have even have accepted, literally, just a tweet saying protect women in sports, because that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter. The reality of this situation is that the most important thing is that the players in the WNBA are safe. But the reality is, for these people, it doesn't matter as long as it's the players they like are safe. For the likes of Jemele Hill, it matters more that, you know, Aaliyah Boston doesn't have to hear fans criticizing her for missing a game winner on Twitter. That matters more than an actual stalker for Caitlyn Clark. And then when she realized how bad the tweet is, she just goes, I'm just going to go delete it and pretend it didn't happen. The internet never forgets, but the internet does forgive. And in this situation, you can just be a decent person. But no, you, just like Roberta, just like Natalie Esquire, just like your man Williamson, these were cowards. You're all cowards. And I mean that, because in life, you can admit you're wrong. We're all going to be wrong in situations. We're all going to take the wrong side in situations. Every single one of us as people are going to back somebody for a wrong reason. You're going to ignore some things you probably shouldn't ignore. But the reality of the situation is, when an opportunity presents itself for the easiest, just slam dunk, I was wrong, and you're too much of a coward to admit that, man, you guys are embarrassing. You're all embarrassing. From the Staley situation a couple of months ago, to what we're seeing from Jemele Hill now, to what we're seeing from the likes of Roberta, to what we're seeing from the likes of all these other quote-unquote fake journalists. You're all cowards. You're all actually cowards. Because the reality of the situation is that, especially when you guys have spewed I'm not going to... Don Staley was a one-off, but the rest of them have spewed so much hate towards Caitlyn Clark, demanding Caitlyn Clark basically solve freaking world peace while she's going through all this stuff. And then, because you knew every single one of you in the media, by the way, I can guarantee you every single one of the people I've mentioned has gotten a whole bunch of hate and has gotten a whole bunch of abuse in their DMs, because I have as well. It's what comes with the territory. And to pretend that Caitlyn Clark didn't get any is intentionally misleading people to spew hate. And they've done that the whole freaking year. And now looking at the Jemele Hill thing, just backing Jemele Hill deleting a post, like, and not saying anything. Heck, like, that's just a sign. Like, I'm sorry, like, you cannot say someone that would do that. Like, there's decency of being a decent person. Like, in this scenario, being a decent person matters in anything, because this is not a basketball topic. This is a topic about a 22-year-old who is just dealing with a stalker. Can you guys not be a decent person? Because, yeah, I get it. You could maybe argue that this video is in bad faith because the focus is on these people rather than on Caitlyn, if whether she or not she's okay. But the reality is that I think that is the most important thing. The most important thing is that she's okay. And that's been always the most important thing. And we've seen it throughout the year. How many times have I said it? It's like, nobody has ever asked Caitlyn, is she okay? They've asked Caitlyn about, how she feels about people online, about online trolls, but nobody's ever asked her, is she okay with the stuff she's had to deal with? And the reality is, I think she's got a great support system around her. It is kind of scary, though, now that people are like, oh, Caitlyn's being humble and, like, she's trying to hide herself. And I think that's probably, unless Caitlyn Clark is, like, front and center, like when she's there at an Iowa game and it's obvious that she's there and she's meant to be there, it's probably not good to report on that if she's just walking around. But unfortunately, that situation being a celebrity, it's not going to stop. But at the same time, like, it's just so it's horrible to see. It's horrible to see. And the fact that none of them can just admit they were wrong. In any situation involving her, they can't just admit they were wrong. And it's so sad. And the saddest part about this is that we're going to go into the 2025 WNBA season, and these same people are going to be talking on their networks and everything and spewing more Caitlyn Clark hate like this never happened in 2 weeks. Because we saw it in the Time article. They were all hyping up Caitlyn Clark for 12 hours and then it became anti-Caitlyn Clark again. Because the reality is that they don't hate Caitlyn Clark. Just like they didn't hate Sabrina Ionescu. They hate the fact that the media attention's not gone to A'ja Wilson. Or some of those players. They hate the fact that, people coming in for Sabrina, for Caitlyn Clark, are actual basketball people, and they looked into getting a job because they don't give a damn about the sport. And they'll do everything they can to break number 22, because if they break number 22, if they break her, everything goes. Their jobs are safe. The actual good people covering the media are safe. So I really, really do. I'm posting this as like just to talk about the conversation that we need to start to see a change. We need to see the WNBA actually do something to show they give a damn about their most important player. They give a damn about the mental health of their players. Not just the other 143. They give a damn about the mental health about their most important player. And that Caitlyn Clark's a damn person to them. Because to these idiots in the WNBA media, she's not a person. She's not a person. So yeah, that's the video. Again, look, I would love to not make these videos. I would love to talk about... I've got a whole bunch of basketball videos ready. Talking about how Cardoso's playing, how Iowa are struggling. Like, I've got a lot of basketball stuff. But I think this is important to be said because the league needs rid of these people. The WNBA needs rid of these people. And I think that just staying silent and not talking about it gives them more opportunities to be front and center at WNBA, to be on these networks, when the reality is that they're the worst things. They're not only horrible for the sport of basketball, they're horrible for the people in the league. And at the end of the day, they have more weight than a guy talking on social media does. Like, that's what my job is. That's what I excel at. I'm good. I've got 2 freaking plaques behind me. I'm good at talking in front of a social media camera. I wouldn't make a good journalist. My arguments are almost too emotional for that. I wouldn't make a good journalist. I wouldn't make a good person on TV. But you know what? They're just horrible people. They're not even good at their job, and they're assholes. So anyway, yeah, I'll see you guys.